Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I am Richard Dugan, Reverend Dr. D, and we are joined by, I'm going to say, I'm probably not quite accurate, but I wouldn't be far off, I don't think, a fellow broadcaster, a fellow producer of audio. He is joining us for the very first time all the way, I'll say from my home state, but not my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, to talk about the work that he is all about. And we are really very excited to have Colby Elliotte with us here on the program, and he's going to share with us something rather interesting. It's called Geekery and Wine. We'll find out what that's all about. And then, by the way, it pours a tapestry of stories, which is what we're all about here on Tell Me Your Story, best savored in audio. Colby, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me today, Richard. I really appreciate it. It's going to be fun.
Our folks that are listening, both radio and I almost said television and video, audio and video, they're going to get a little treat as we pause every so often to let folks know what they're listening to, who they're listening to. We're going to drop in some excerpts from this whole experience that you have provided for us to have an opportunity to take a look at. And
fantastic.
Talk to us about your understanding and awareness of the importance of storytelling, because I know you and I are both familiar with people who actually refer to themselves as, it's their title, if you will, their profession, as storytellers.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I know that stories sometimes, I know in Indian culture, a native Indian culture here on the American continent, they will tell stories, and then there will be apprentices who will listen, and they must tell the story, word for word, the way it has been passed down from generation to generation. So share with us your impressions and why this is so important to you.
Yeah. So, for me, I've done presentations for like Comic-Cons and different sort of pop culture cons and that kind of thing. And, whenever I start to talk about that, I always go back to the fire, the fire and the cave and telling the big story right there about, this is how we went and we hunted the mammoth. And that kind of thing. I mean, it goes back literally that far where you have those kinds of storytellers and then through the ideas of the bards and whatnot too. And for me, I've always loved that oral storytelling tradition. I think, like so many people in my generation, our sort of burning bush moment that we had was, in 1977 with Star Wars.
Mm.
And for me, it was a little bit different in the respect that I got an EP of Roscoe Lee Brown telling the story of Star Wars on a vinyl. And I absolutely loved, he had this rich voice that just sort of rolled like thunder. And I loved hearing him. And that sort of got me going with loving tales told in an audio way. And I was from a small town in Nebraska, a little place called North Platte. And we had a spinner in the corner that had all of our audiobooks in little Ziploc bags. And I had my little Star-Lord cassette player, my Walkman that I would walk around with those. And because there weren't very many of them, I listened to them all. And so there would be sometimes it'd be like, what are you listening to? I'm listening to this thing. It's called, it's called the Maltese Falcon. It's like, oh, okay, that's pretty interesting for a third grader. Okay, sure. And like I'd listen to, Westerns or Treasure Island, or even sometimes it would be like a romance kind of books, sort of, anything that was there. I would just pick it up just to listen to it. And that sort of started my love of audio storytelling. And I can remember very vividly walking to school in October and listening to the Tales of Edgar Allan Poe told by Vincent Price and Basil Rathbone. So it was just one of those, it just sparked my mind. And so I went through college, and I did a little bit of interning at a radio station, got a chance to sort of lurk around the studio a little bit and create things from time to time, which was really fun. And then from there, I was a theater teacher for 12 years. And while I was doing that, I really wasn't hired so much to be the teacher for the actors as I was the teacher for the technicians. So I was kind of like the shop teacher of the building. I was teaching kids how to use tools for the first time and how to do things with electricity and wire lights. But at the same time, I was also doing sound. So I was mixing for live audio. And by mixing for live audio, I got very familiar with microphones and sound tables and sound effects and digital audio workstations and that kind of thing. And it sort of built things up to the point where I said to myself, I think I could probably make an audiobook at this point. And I think we all have those treasures that we keep on our shelves, the books that it's like, oh, I love this book so much. And you just keep it around, even though you've read it probably 2 or 3 times. And maybe it's your comfort food. And I picked up this book and I said, I'm gonna make this into an audiobook. And I want to see what happens. So I made the audiobook. I sent a copy of it to the authors and I said, what do you think? And they're like, it's great. What do you want us to say? I'm like, well, I'd like to put this out there and see if maybe we could sell it. And wouldn't that be fun? And they were like, yeah. And we did. And that was my first one. That was probably in about 2010. And then I started building that body of work, and now it's 2, 3, 10. And now I've got about 62 titles or so that I've produced for Audible and iTunes.
And these are books that you have written or that you have narrated for others who have written? Or these are production?
Some of each, yeah. Nice. I've got about 12 books that I've done, that I've written. Some of them are travel logs, going to like San Diego Comic-Con, New York City Comic-Con, and Gen Con, which is a tabletop role-playing convention. I've got travel logs that I've done of all those. I've also written a series of novellas called The Adventures of a Stay-at-Home Shaman. And it's about a guy who's a stay-at-home dad who solves the problems, the combined spiritual problems of the neighborhood during nap time by journeying out into the dream world. And so that I've about six novellas that I've written there. The 7th one will cap off that particular cycle of of books. And then the most recent, of course, that I just put out was Geekery and Wine, which combines some of my audiobooks, like talking about them in terms of liner notes, how they came to be and why I produced them, and some of the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned along the way, as well as going into like geek culture things that I've wanted to pass along to my kids and share with them. And also elements of wine, which is, stories of friendship. I had a friend of mine who asked me to be the guy who officiated his wedding. And so I had to figure out a whole, ceremony and all that kind of stuff. And along the way, we had this wonderful bottle of wine that still means a whole lot to me. And I still talk about it through those stories that we have tied together. So that's where our whole Tapestry thing comes in, I think.
Now, I take it you don't have that bottle of wine anymore.
Well, I do.
Or do you?
I could probably go revisit it. It wouldn't be the same vintage, no. But luckily, it's pretty good. As though that couple is still together. He's a teacher in China right now. He teaches like diplomats and their kids and stuff. They have a special school for them over in China, and he does the English language school over there with his wife. So, and they're still together, which that's a good sign. Yeah, I know exactly that bottle of wine is called Seven Terraces Pinot Noir. It's from New Zealand, the Northern Island, where you usually expect things like Sauvignon Blancs, but in this case, it's a Pinot Noir, and it was really intriguing. And we got to have it at a steakhouse together. And I pick it up occasionally if I ever think I need something I know is going to be dependable. So I'll pick one of those up. Yeah, for sure.
Colby Elliott, my guest. It is Geekery and Wine. It's the first case, ladies and gentlemen, which means there are more. Now, whether or not the vintage is going to be the same in the second and third and fourth case, only you can be the judge of that. We hope that it is. And I'm pretty certain that it will be as we continue talking here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D, and he is Colby Elliott, and he's produced a wonderful audio, I call it an audio presentation or book, if you will, or blog, Geekery and Wine, the first case. And I love the publisher, Last Word Audio. That is marvelous. And you and I shared a little bit when we talked, when we were setting up this conversation for the program. I think back on not only my first stint in radio, which was a radio reading service, but in that particular genre was one of my favorite things to do was radio theater. And you mentioned one of your favorite recordings, and one of mine, in addition to, not egotistically stating this, was the Moat Farm Murder by Norman Corwin, but also H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Wow. And I fell in love with that. But more importantly, as I was growing up, and we would travel the 60 miles from Phoenix to Florence and Coolidge to visit my mother and father's parents. As we were driving home at night, going home, we would be tuned to KOOL AM radio, and we would listen to CBS Radio Mystery Theater with E.G. Marshall. Oh, my heavens. Sometimes they were scary, but it was the production values that were so wonderful. And I think in that case, everybody was in studio. And maybe they had the orchestra in another studio and they had it all mic'd up and boom, boom. And it wasn't live. I know it was recorded. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, when they were producing the recordings, and I tell you, when you finish a production, well, let me ask you, how do you feel when you finish a piece and you know inside that even though, you could go back through it and you could find little things you could tweak here and tweak there, it's perfect. It's ready to go, and you could actually play it, and maybe tears would come to your eyes because it's like, wow, that sounds really cool. And to quote Urkel, did I do that?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely know what you mean. I mean, I've one of the things that I try to do when I'm producing audiobooks is I try to give it enough space in between the time when I am the actor performing it and then when I'm the director who's doing some of the final polish work before it actually goes out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those decisions are very, very different. There might be something that as an actor, you're in the moment, you're feeling it. It's like, oh, this line has this reading. And I'll go back and I'll do it two other different ways, do separate takes of it,
Mm-hmm.
just so that I have something to choose from later on when I take off that actor's hat and put on that director's hat. And at that point, I'm going to be choosing what's going to be right for the production as a whole, not that moment. And the actor in the moment may not know what that right choice is, but the director, seeing it from that 30,000-foot view, can actually find out, oh, it's like, oh, this is the most important thing, and make it into a better production.
Mm-hmm.
So I love both of those hats when I get to wear them. They're both really exciting. But yeah, there's times when I will be doing I'm doing a last listen through for a book that's going to be coming out here in about 3 weeks, a book called Catapult, about these two friends that decided to build a catapult together to launch rocks off of the headlands in San Francisco into the ocean as an art project. And it's just been fascinating and fun. But it's mostly the story of these two friends and how they come together, they butt heads, and make this really fun and cool thing. And as I'm listening to it, I'm getting a little bit choked up because those friendships are like so incredibly cool. But then I go back to the first thing that you mentioned when you were talking about radio drama. You know, radio drama has always been a huge thing for me. Like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I think I wore out those cassette tapes when I was walking around England as an exchange student. I bought them over there and listened to the BBC recording of it, and it was just amazing. And I actually got to do a really amazing audio drama called Of Fae and Fiends, through Final Rune Productions, and I got to play a couple of different monsters in that. The guy who was in charge of it, the director, was a guy named Bill DeFries, who a lot of little kids might know was the voice of Bob the Builder for the United States. And he was also the voice of Peter Parker and Spider-Man for the BBC radio production of The Amazing Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And I got to work on this amazing audio production with them. And it was wonderful. And there were times when I was face to face in the same studio with that person, making eye contact. And it's so different than when you're doing an audio production and you are all the voices, when all the voices are the ones in your head, when you can actually see that expression on that other actor's face. There's nothing quite like it. And
Yeah.
Connecting on that level. So I guess I just covered a whole bunch of the things that you mentioned before, but you mentioned so many really great things. I felt like I had to talk about them.
We're talking with Colby Elliott, and I'm having a blast because I'm reminiscing with him about his past as well as mine, and we're going to continue doing that here on Tell Me Your Story. I am intrigued by the memories that you bring up in my mind, and I'm going to throw out a couple of names, maybe one or two names here. I had a dear friend who's since passed away, but he used to talk about the various voices or actors, if you will, voice actors for cartoons, June Ferrer and so forth, as well as Don LaFontaine, who used to do the movie trailer voice and so forth. But what I grew up on more than anything else, in addition to, of course, radio theater, the E.G. Marshall, my best friend, who I knew for 53 years before his passing, we would go over to his house, which was on my way to my house from school, and he had recorded from his brother had the albums, he didn't, but his brother allowed him to record the double album of The United States of America, The Early Years by Stan Freberg.
Huh.
And we listened to that so much that we would start doing it when we're going from one class to the other. And this was in grade school before we got into high school. We still did it in high school too.
Yeah.
Here's what the one comes to mind more than anything else. You have a dream? Oh, yes, I do. Why would you like to talk about it? Yes, I would. I'd like to bring the finer things from Italy, spaghetti and da 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 da. And it's Christopher Columbus landing on the shores of the New World, and he's talking with the natives and so forth. Another one of my favorites was they're not quite there yet, and all of a sudden you hear the whistle blow, land ho, and and Chris basically said the king is with him. All right, in this particular satire, and the king is with him, and he says, and Chris says, well, let me just climb up the rigging here to see if I can see the land. And the king's response is, you mean that on top of everything else, this ship is rigged? But just so many one-liners. Now, here's the sad part about that whole double album. Now, by the way, I went on and I bought the double album of Stan Freberg, The United States of America, The Middle Years, which picks up into the 19th into the 20th century. But the sad part about the satire is Stan Freberg might be deported for some of the humor, which back then was very, very funny.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the changing genres over the decades as you and I have gotten older, and things that we listened to back then that we still will listen to, because you and I, we have the frame of reference. We know that's the way it was back then.
Right.
Somebody today, maybe in their teens, 20s, 30s, they would be outraged, offended, and on and on and on. What about that aspect of all of what you are producing today? How do you address, how do I put this, the sensitivity of the listener?
So, one of the things that you mentioned before is you mentioned that you like the name of my production company, which is Last Word Audio. So the reason that it's called Last Word Audio is because I try to go out into things in the past that have not had their moment yet, who may have been just discarded, or maybe it was a time before this audiobook could be made. And I find these older things and I try to bring them up and bring them into the present as much as I can, and then that way they get to have the last word on the subject. And so that's why it's Last Word Audio. And I tend to find a lot of things that are in the historical that are really intriguing. And you can find those things that are still perfect or still have a real interesting and resonant voice that fits well into the modern paradigm without having to worry about it being offensive. Those things I think are classics. And that's part of what makes them classics. Like you listen to something like, when I was growing up, I had Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh, yeah.
And I listened to those. I could recite them all from memory. It was the best. And I think those still are ones that you listen to and can gain a lot from today. And so there is that element of classic. Humor is always going to change. I love going back and listening to like some of what I would consider to be like the classic stand-up comedy routines. Like I would go back and listen to Bob Newhart, who was the absolute king of taking a telephone and conducting a one-sided conversation that was side-splittingly hilarious.
Yes.
And then you kind of look at someone like Lenny Bruce, who an earlier time and was edgy for his time, but at the same time, he kind of started going down other paths where he was experimenting with the form that didn't work as well as some of the earlier things that he might have done. And I think both of those are really interesting to look at. But yeah, what is satirical and what's funny is going to change from every 5 to 10, and definitely every generation. Yeah. But I think as someone like me from Gen X, we're not really offended by much because our catchphrase for the whole generation is whatever. So, or if someone tells you something that happened to you, you say, yeah, but did you die? No? Okay, well you're fine. Shake it off, rub some dirt on it, off you go. And it was just a different time period. And I do find it really interesting to see what my kids find interesting. I have children that are between the ages of 33 and 19. And they each have things that are super important to how they view the world. And I think looking at those and seeing what they find important, it sort of makes me dust off my Mr. Rogers cardigan and put it on and say, you know what? I like you. I like you just the way you are. And if you have sensitivities there, okay, I get that. But there's something with a little bit, yeah, there's that sense of whatever, but there's also, every Gen Xer also has Mr. Rogers telling you to be kind.
Yeah.
And I think it's those two messages when they come together and how you find the way that those weave together, that's how you take on what is acceptable, what's funny, what's offensive within the modern world. As long as you have that undercurrent, I think, of kindness, and I think that can go a long way.
I just wish that there were more people that understood that satire is just that. And if it's making fun of poking a little bit, you might say poking the bear
Mhm.
in that regard, but it's not meant to be, mean and cantankerous and so forth, that kind of thing. By the way, that's a word my mother used to use, cantankerous and so forth.
Well, you got if you can't be cantankerous, then you can't engage in shenanigans, and both of those things are super important.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And by the way, some of my favorites of that era that you're talking about, I've got albums. I still have the albums. And a matter of fact, when I was working for, interestingly enough, I was working for a station back in Phoenix, and we came up with this idea for a short little 2-minute vignette segment called Very Funny. And so what I did was I recorded onto a computer my albums from people like, I have these albums of Sam Kennison, Father
Hmm.
Guido Sarducci,
Hmm.
Steve Martin,
Hmm.
and several others. Um, and then I would edit them down so that they still made sense, but that we fit them into a 2-minute with the intro outro. And I got to tell, and I still have those on my computer. I've got them stashed away somewhere in a folder somewhere on my hard drives. But the producing of those kinds of things was so much fun.
Hmm.
The when I was doing radio theater, and you talked about this as well, our method wasn't, okay, everybody come on into the studio, and here's the scripts, and here we go, and I'll play the sound effects and the music as we go. No, we didn't do it that way because we didn't have the facilities. So what we did was we laid down the voice tracks first.
Hmm.
And as we're going through one script, especially the Norman Corwin script of Moat Farm Murder, there's a scene where the husband, he is digging with a shovel in the dirt. And we knew we're going to need a shovel, a sound of a shovel in the dirt as a sound effect. So we'll lay down later. So I told the actor, I says, okay, I need you to deliver these lines as you're doing this, as if you are actually physically digging in the dirt. So I need you to make that, and you're talking to your wife who's standing up above you and so forth as you're digging this deep hole and so forth, which, by the way, was for her.
Hmm.
Then we went outside, and they were doing construction right in the area there. So we took, back then, the IBM Selectrics, those monster typewriters. And they
I
came with,
had one.
yeah, well, they came with
Yeah, it was great.
and they came with a metal copy holder.
Uh-huh.
So we took a Marantz cassette deck and a microphone and the copy holder, and we went out to the dirt pile, and I dug in the dirt while the other guy held the microphone and the cassette recorder. And we took it back, and this was after the cast was gone. We
Hmm.
took it back into the studio, and we laid it down, and we were using a 2-track, I think it was a 2-track TAC, and we'd record the voice on the left, and then we laid the sound effects on the right. And when we played it back after we laid that down, How it matched up to this guy's voice, I will never know. I mean, those are the miracles and the wonderful surprises. I'm sure you've had those kinds of things happen to you in your production as well, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many times where you're mixing together something and you think you found the exact sound effect that you want to put in with it. And even with Geekery and Wine, there's some of the ones that I start talking about, different things, and I was like, oh, I want this sound effect.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be right there at hand. It fits in perfectly and it tells the story exactly as it needs to happen. And that is one of those wonderful moments of magic for sure.
And that's
Yeah.
the right word for it, magic. And
Yes, yes.
one of the things that I bring up on this program with other guests as well, when we get into more metaphysical things, has to do with our intuition.
Hmm.
And also, and to me, this is part of the intuitive aspect, being in the zone, just like a sports, like a ball player, baseball, basketball, foot, whatever. And you're just on. So when you're in the studio, I'm sure you get that feeling every so often. It's like you're not even thinking about it. It's
Yeah.
just flowing, right?
Have you read the book Flow by Chihai Csikszentmihalyi?
No, but
It's
I will now.
such a good book. Yeah. And it talks about that zone aspect of it. It's that, and I think, we go back to some of the earliest times in our lives when you have the clock on the wall and it spins like it's in a cartoon. That's when you're in that flow zone. And for some of us, like I have a lot of geek things that happen that way. Like when I started playing tabletop role playing games with my friends, we would start off and it would be like noon on a Saturday. And then we'd look up and it was 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. And all we'd been doing is sitting and telling these stories and doing funny voices and having these wonderful story arcs. And you just watch everything spin that way. And we had the same thing that happened too with certain video games can get you into that sort of that zone like that as well. I think with writing, absolutely with writing, I always try to budget in what I call fall in time. Because if you try to sit and write your next book and you try to sit it down in 45-minute increments, it can be fine, but it's going to feel very, very produced, very mechanical. And I feel like you need to give yourself enough time to fall in to achieve that flow. And then once you're in that flow state and you start to see the hands on the clock start to spin, that's when you're accessing something a little bit deeper. You're going into your subconscious. You're also creating those problems for your subconscious to solve that are not going to be solved in the moment of that genesis at the keyboard. Those are some of the ones that you're going to have to take to bed that night and think about for like maybe 5 to 10 minutes before you've set down the book that you're reading for fun, and just a few minutes before you go to sleep, I think about that interesting thing that came up in the studio and try to get my brain to defragment, to flow around that idea, so that when I get up the next day, it's coalesced into something that I can then put out and go, oh yeah, my mind did this while I was sleeping. It was while I was dreaming and recovering and everything like this. My brain came up with a solution, and here it is. And I absolutely believe that that's something that you channel all the time. It's a creative spark. It's the muse that the Greeks talk about. Yeah, 100%. Yes, sir.
It is it is a process that you and I share in that regard, and it is absolutely remarkable. I'm 65. I got into this business in 1979. However, my father, when before he was married, he was an appliance repairman. So when he got married and had the kids, he had a small little portable turntable and a reel-to-reel, and there were a microphone and so forth. And along the way, I bought one of these radios that picked up the audio of television stations in the area.
Oh, wow.
All right. And so I would be recording, for example, I would be recording straight in. This was not open mic. This was with a cable. Star Trek, the first generation, the first series, in the 60s. And then other things like that. And I still have those tapes, by the way, the reel to reels.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And there's just something about being able to create those kinds of things, but not out of a sense of, look what I created. It's, I used to build models as a kid when I was growing
Hmm.
up. All right.
Yeah.
When I would finish the model, there was such a sense of satisfaction. So it's the same thing with all of this production when you finish it. Matter of fact, I wasn't in the business more than 2 years. 1980 or 81, my best friend of 53 years before his passing, he, I, and even my first wife would go into the studios at the Sun Sounds Radio Reading Studios, and they were only on from sunrise to sunset, and they were on a sub carrier of the public radio station in Phoenix. And I think it's still K-Jazz now. It was something else before. But anyway, so we'd go in there after hours and I'd throw a tape up there and we would start to play radio. All right.
Same. I did the same thing when I was interning at the radio station. I would come in when I wasn't on shift because they would let me go into the studio and just start to do like mad creations of things. So I would put together like echoing chambers and whatnot. And I said, "Hey guys, this is what it would sound like if we had a bobsledding team of Buddhist monks," and then I would create that sound with the sound of the bobsled going down the run and then chanting the entire way and with the echoes and everything. And I would just have the silliest, and I would come out of the studio. They'd be like, "You're insane." Yeah, but it was just this wonderful creative,
Oh,
just to be able to play, just to be able to play with the tools and have fun, to see what's possible.
well, what's interesting is when we would do it, we did it one session, and I know I have at least two reel to reels with two different recording sessions. One of them was at Christmas time.
Uh-huh.
And so I put the reel to reel not in record. Well, it was recording, but I had it set so I flipped the switch for playing from the playhead,
Hmm.
and then I could play around with the reverb, the echo, and so forth. And then I would sing Christmas songs, or we would play with it, and I'd turn it up a lot, and it would be horribly overmodulated but echoey all over the place. And we would do those kinds of things. But then when I went to work for another station, and I was working at the transmitter site, and they had these big clunky cart decks, right?
Oh yeah.
They had one that was play only. They had another one that was play record. And I wanted to try to get a slight echo. And so I'm playing and playing with it, and I would record to the record deck, and then I'd take that card out, and I put it over in the play only, and then I would figure out the synchronization, boom boom or boom boom or whatever it was, and then I would create that effect. Right.
Hmm.
One day, I was playing around with it, and I created this very unusual sound, but I didn't have a name for it. I just liked the sound. It was really cool. Then when I got my first computer audio editing program, and I was playing around with the various sound effects that you can affect your audio,
Hmm.
and it then hit me that I didn't create it, mind you, but I did discover the effect called flange.
Yep.
Those are the most remarkable things that you come across as you get into that creative mode. Somebody else may have created it.
Yeah.
You discovered it on your own, and so you can't take credit for it per se. But that was so fascinating. And I think there was one other experience. Maybe you've tried this. Got an album. The chief engineer at the religious station I was working for, he was installing the turntables.
Hmm.
And I put a record on, I put it in queue, and I'm going, that didn't sound right. The vocal, Amy Grant, that's the song we're playing. Why is she way in the background? He says, oh, hang on a second, it's out of phase, which I didn't know what at the time. So he fixed it, and boom, there it was. So I have my computer program. I'm recording this album in stereo, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I could create a sing-along soundtrack, now known as karaoke.
Yep.
And I did it. I mean, it was like I was able to recreate that effect. Now, the engineer wasn't trying to do that.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
so much fun.
Oh yeah, yeah, using phase shift and using the flange and all that. I think a lot of us, at least for me, it goes back to when, you had that first turntable, and it was me and the kid who was like 5 doors down. We would get all the old albums out, and of course you'd try them out at different speeds. If there's all the speeds, you're going to try them out. I made Tom Jones singing "She's a Lady" sound like it was the Chipmunks. I made Dolly Parton sound like James Earl Jones by slowing it all the way down. It was just like, it was so much fun, and that little bit of playing, and then being able to have just the tools get a little bit more fine, a little bit more interesting. Discovering the phase shift is one of the main responsible things for karaoke. Absolutely, and just getting a chance to play in the toolbox. Yeah, so much fun. Oh, I remember there were some times when I worked at my radio station. It was actually 2 radio stations separated by a glass door, and I had to run both if I was doing the overnight. One of them was big band, and that was the AM station, and the other one was Oldies 95 KLDZ. And it was, I would have to keep those 2 going. I'd have my carts on one side. The other one was kind of satellite and CD driven, so I'd have to keep my modality separate. But it was always really fun going back and forth. It's like I had this much time to do the weather and traffic over here in the big band before I had to come back here and change out all my carts for the next hour for the next set of ads that were coming on. It was amazing. It felt like being a sonic air traffic controller. I loved it.
I tell you, folks, yeah, reminiscing for me, but I can use this during the phase that my wife and I are going through of moving to a new location, and the incredible technological advancements that have been made since I got into this business, where I don't have to travel every day 200 miles to the radio station, do my stint, and then 200 miles back and forth and back and forth. I can actually work remotely from my home, which is absolutely incredible. Now, certainly there are certain things I won't be able to do. If something goes wrong with the equipment, well, then somebody's going to have to go in there and take care of it from their location. But the thing that is so remarkable to me is the fact that you talked about 2 radio stations divided by a glass door. And today you can have 2 radio stations right there on your computer or computers. Yeah.
One on each screen.
One on each screen. It's just incredible. We're talking with Colby Elliott, and we're talking about what he has available for y'all. You can go to Amazon.com, geekery-wine-the-first-case. Looks like /DP. It'll probably get you there. It'll probably autofill and what have you. But it's Geekery and Wine, the first case, and we hope that you'll get yourself a copy of it. Go to Amazon and find all about that as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, making all kinds of sounds here on the program with my good friend here, Colby Elliott. And one of the things that is so fascinating to me, and I don't do this much anymore, but I'm not sure exactly why I stopped doing this, but I used to do voices. I mean, I would be in studio with our hosts when we were doing in studio pre-2020, and I would break into maybe an Irish brogue a little bit there, you see, and we'll spend a little time there in the Blarney Castle, and we'll kiss the stone. And by the way, people think, oh, it gives you the gift of gab. That's not what it gives you. It gives you the gift of eloquence. There's a difference, a big difference. And my wife and I both kissed the stone, I want you to know. You too.
Me
Excellent.
too. Yes. One of the things they have you do before you get to, you know how you had to lean back to kiss the
Uh-huh.
stone and they had you clean out all of your pockets so you didn't dump all your change and your glasses down in the
Yeah.
bottom of the castle. I thought that was hilarious. But yes, I too have kissed the stone. It was
Oh,
yeah. I was an exchange student in Great Britain for a year, my junior year abroad. I was in northern England up in a place called Preston. And so we traveled all over Ireland and all parts of the UK and even a little bit onto the European continent too. So yeah,
oh.
absolutely.
Well, we're hoping that this house we're buying is another step towards moving to Ireland.
Mhm.
Although people think, well, why would you buy a house if you want to move to Ireland? Well, because it could be both a home and an investment. You never know.
Very
In
true.
any event, but I love doing different voices. Matter of fact, one of the voices I did, I was told to write a commercial for this one health food store, and I was working at that time again for that Christian station back in Phoenix,
Hmm.
and I came up with this character voice of an old guy. And I often wondered if I could go to, how like sometimes that they have at carnivals or state fairs, they have these people that will draw cartoons. And I
Hmm.
would say, could you draw me what your impression of this voice is? I've always wanted to do that. But the guy was kind of old and crotchety, and he was born before sliced bread. And I just, and those kinds of things. And I think there was even a voice that I stopped doing after a while because it was a little too hard on the throat. What
Hmm.
about you in terms of creating voices as you're reading, whether it's for someone else's book or yours, and coming up with a character voice that
Well,
works, but it's a little hard on the throat, it could hurt yourself.
absolutely. When you're doing character creation, like if you're starting off with a fiction audiobook, you start off with your character Bible. Like, what are all of these main characters going to be like, and how much time do I have to spend in each one of their voices? One that I did recently was actually about a year ago, came out. It was called Greenbeard, and it was a science fiction pirate epic. And so for about 12 hours, I had to talk like I was a pirate, which, and blow me down and that kind of thing. And that was a very difficult voice to kind of keep in for multiple hours without a lot of tea and whatnot. So that took me a little while. One of the things that we do as narrators, I've seen a lot of people do, is you'll find something that is a completely off base impression of a particular famous person. It's like, this is me doing Tim Allen or something, and it sounds nothing like Tim Allen, but what it does sound like is a unique character voice, which
Yeah.
is really, really intriguing. I had a friend, a colleague that I saw did that, and they were a little bit more accurate than what they thought. And so it's like, wait a minute, that sounds like Patrick Warburton. It's like, well, I talked to him about that. It says, yeah, it is kind of my Patrick Warburton, but I didn't think it was that good. It's like, no, 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 it's very accurate, and it kind of sounds like Patrick Warburton is the protagonist of that audiobook, which is kind of cool and kind of weird in a way too. It sort of takes you out of the story, but at the same time, it's a really kind of a cool accomplishment. But yeah, absolutely. Also another thing that I do with character voices is I try to think of it in terms, when I first went to university, I was a vocal performance major. I was going to be an opera singer. And so I was studying music theory, musicology, all that kind of thing. And it was a lot of fun. But first, when I started doing character voices for audio, I would consider it as soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And then I would subdivide those into soprano one, soprano two, on down through bass one, bass two. And that was the placement of where that particular character voice was. So, for example, a young boy might be a soprano two. He might be a little bit up here, like this, whereas someone who is older might be all the way down here, and they might be a baritone. And that might be another particular voice. And so I think about those in terms of what their pitches are within music first, and how they're going to be placed within the instrument that's your voice. And then you start thinking about regionality, circumstance, were they raised? Who taught them how to speak? And that's how you start to see that character begin to coalesce.
Mm. You
Yeah.
know, and it's interesting too that I narrated a book called Breakfast Ball by I think his name is Joel Mahoney, and he's here a local Santa Barbara author, and it's a series. And I originally did it. Oh, it has to be 3 years ago. We're still in the process of editing it, only because life has gotten in the way and all those kinds of things. But he wants me to do the other 5 or 6 books that he's
Hmm.
got going. And I would love to take it on. And I'm hoping that, when we get moved, I can connect with him and we can move forward on Breakfast Ball. But it was interesting. He would tell me about the various characters. And there's this one female character that he wanted me to do like Sofia Bagara. And I thought, okay, I can give it a shot if you would like for me to do this. Yes, of course. But I also had to read the words he had written the way she would say them
Hmm.
phonetically so as to get the right pronunciation and so forth. And I've watched her on Modern Family as well as America's Got Talent, and so I know how she speaks. But it's like one of those things when they ask you to do it a certain way,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, I don't know. I'll give it a shot. I hope you like it, but and so it's coming up with all of these different voices. And then I was also part of a wonderful dramatic presentation, and it is the unabridged dramatized version of, are you ready for this? The Quran.
Ooh. Okay.
And I was given several different parts, and I worked with the director, producer. I've even had him on this program to talk about the production as well as about Islam and the Quran and so forth, and the words that people use to try to describe it and discredit it, and this and that and the other. Fascinating, fascinating. But I
Hmm.
wanted to be a part of that because I wanted to know more. I'm not
Hmm.
looking to convert. I'm a metaphysician, so
Hmm.
I take on the Baha'i faith. Their founder Baha'u'llah has a statement, and he says, "If you accept one of the messengers of God, you accept them all. If you reject one of the messengers of God, you reject them all." And we're not talking about the prophets or the savior or this or that or that. We're talking messengers, and of course, it all depends on what you refer. But I'm a curious individual. Have
Hmm.
you taken on projects that you've wanted to because of that your own curiosity? Because you come across to me obviously as a very inquisitive and curious individual who just wants to know more about more.
Absolutely, 100%. Every single time when I am thinking in terms of a book, I have to think of it in terms of, is this a book I want to live in? Is this a book that I want to live in for a month and be those characters for a month? So if it's a new genre that I've not experienced yet, I did a young adult mystery novel. Never done one of those before. And it was fascinating. And I just wanted to dive in and discover the tropes of the genre and figure out a way to put them out there the best. And it was just fascinating. And the same with some of the nonfiction stuff that I've come across too. Every single one of the ones that I pick up are passion projects. And it's because I want to know more about that particular genre, that particular thing. And by diving into it, I get a chance to kind of marinate my brain in that kind of thing. And I do love that. There are always other projects that are further out that I'm not sure if I'm ready for yet. And as soon as I'm ready for it, I'll step up and I'll send that particular sample to the author and say, what do you think about doing this? But I think they have to have their time, and they also have to be within a particular creative period for me. Because like with most artists, you look at, like, well, let's take for example like Picasso. Picasso had his blue period, he had his cubist period, and it's like, okay, I understand that. And for me, I had my Comic-Con period where I was talking mostly about comic book characters.
Hmm.
And then I had another period where I was talking more generally about pop culture. And once I get inside of that, I start to go down those tributaries longer distances and to see how far I can learn on some of these. what there is to find out about them. And absolutely, that's something that is definitely a draw for why I pick the books that I pick.
Yeah, and I have to say that there is a certain element of sadness that more people aren't that way. And again, I'm not trying to encourage anybody to be a particular way
Mhm.
because I think that that element of curiosity is something that still keeps you an individual. It
Mhm.
doesn't, make you have to be a particular way, think or believe or feel a particular way. The curiosity actually, we talk about that on this program too. When we do these programs, each guest places on this giant smorgasbord table
Mhm.
what they have to offer.
Mhm.
And I encourage people to come and partake of that table. And if it resonates with you, great. Pick it up, take it away, read it, listen to it, whatever, and then come back because now you have been changed by what you've read.
Mhm.
And maybe something that didn't resonate with you the last time you were here might this time. And so you pick that up. And so that's how we grow. That's how we evolve, if you will. When people are upset about the whole concept of evolution, I go, well, then why do you go to school? That is an evolutionary process of the
Mhm.
intellect, of the mind, you know? And we'd like to think that when you go to your local house of worship, whatever you call it, that is also an evolutionary process of hopefully of your soul, of your spirit, and if you go to the gym or this or that or the other, it's the evolutionary process of the body. But it's unfortunate in this day and time that it seems, and I'm getting to the point where I'm beginning to put this together, where to say that there are so many people out there that are so intolerant, not willing to accept. And actually, I believe the reality is that there are very few people out there who are intolerant. It is the minority that screams the loudest,
Mhm.
then that gets the attention.
Mhm.
But I'll bet you that if we were to take a survey of maybe 50% of the population, I would bet you that the majority actually it's a silent majority. And maybe for good reason. I don't post anything on social media. I
Yeah.
don't put myself to that. This is therapy for me, but it is
Yeah.
a certain element of exposure. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that with a lot of people, you're looking at this dichotomy between safety and something scary. And usually the things that are new and untested or untried, the things that could make you uncomfortable can make people scared. And when people are scared, they react in a way that they wouldn't normally react if they were in their right mind. But a lot of times people have, they've got something that's pushing on that fear button that maybe makes it so that they don't want to necessarily take that step of change, even though change is so incredibly constant.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always think is really fun, and it makes me reevaluate things all the time, and I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but they say that every 7 years, all the cells in your body like
Hmm.
shift over. And so every 7 years, you should go back to the things that you don't like. And maybe it's like Brussels sprouts or something like that, and
Hmm.
try it again because you might have a different taste. And like we were talking about, like with Geekery and Wine, my tastes in wine have changed since I wrote the first blog and to how I would write the second case. They've changed over the years
Mm.
because every 7 years you've got that change. And I think that's part of why, you were talking about education, why education is so important, why continuously putting new stimuli in your brain to see how it coalesces with all the other things that you're trying to bring together. Why that's also important is because that change is constant and it's ongoing. And I think education just teaches you how to take those and put them within the whole that is yourself.
Yeah. Well, I hope that people are at least encouraged, if not inspired, to do just that. And I think you're pretty accurate. I've brought that up many times about the body being brand new, or at least evolving every 7 years to a new body. In other words, it's kind of like REM said this, it's the end of the world as we know it. Well, 7 years ago, you had one body, and now it's 7 years later, and you have a new body. Now, it may still have all of the aches and pains and this and that and the other, but all the cells have still changed. And it is said too that the mind could actually reconstruct. I have no vision in my left eye
Mhm.
from glaucoma. And yet, every 7 years, the body changes. So, why aren't the cells of my eye going back to the original form? Or do they just, in essence, do they just duplicate what's there? And then maybe that's what it is. But it's fascinating, the whole biology of man, and how we progress and move forward. And part of that progression is having some fun. And it sounds to me like you are having a whole bunch of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of the things that I've been able to do lately, my wife and I, we've like I was saying before, my kids have gotten a little bit older, and now we're very near to being empty nesters, which means my wife wants to do a little bit more travel. So there was one time where we decided we would just get a place for a week and work remotely up in Toronto, Canada this last summer.
Hmm.
And it was fantastic. And talking about getting a whole set of new stimuli and a whole set of new things that will like inspire you. Really, really great stuff. So a lot of what I do, the things that make me happy are, yeah, they're finding that new and interesting thing to see how I can incorporate it into what my philosophy is, what my life's about. Absolutely.
Colby Elliott, my guest here on Tell Me Your Story, talking about Geekery and Wine, the first case. Yes, we'll have that available to ya. Yes. And we'll talk more about it as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan with Colby Elliott and his latest release, Geekery and Wine, the first case. Really excited to get deeper into it. I've only been able to listen to a little bit, maybe a half hour to 45 minutes. So it's not that long, but it's still a lot of fun to listen to what you've produced. And that's what's interesting too. I'm going to guess that when you are watching a movie, television program, listening to the radio, listening to a recording, listening to an audio book that someone else produced, sometimes it's really hard to sit and listen and watch it with just pure enjoyment because you're critiquing it as an engineer, as a producer, as an editor, and so forth. And sometimes that gets in my way. But I tell you what, if the acting and the production values are really good, it'll take me away from that, which is really kind of cool.
Absolutely. I think, that's when you know that you've gotten past craft. Craft is making a cabinet, and art is when you're making a Chippendale cabinet, where you look at it and you go, this is a whole thing altogether, and it transcends what that form is. And I think when you're watching a film and the storytelling gets you to where, again, like we were talking about before, when the clock starts spinning, when you're in that flow state, all of a sudden you're not paying attention to those small things anymore because you're so invested in what's happening there. And yeah, you do try to search out when the art becomes artless. So I've heard someone say that like the perfect glass of wine would taste like a crystal clear glass of water. And I don't necessarily believe that, but I do think there is a point at which the art becomes, all of the form falls away and you can just enjoy it. I absolutely think that that's true for sure. Yeah.
And what's amazing to me is the boxes of reel to reels that I have carried around with me for well, 44, 45 years I've been collecting. But one nice thing that doesn't take up a lot of room is I have also collected from the different stations sound music beds and production libraries and on and on and on. And I will incorporate those into some of my productions, some of the work that I do. One of my favorite pieces, and I actually had a company, I think it was in 1994. I had a company for 1 year, and I found a piece of music that was actually in essence, the name of my company. The piece of music was called Fast Forward.
Hmm.
And I came up with a slogan for Fast Forward Audio Communications because of the fast forward.
Hmm.
It's the right direction. And I would do interviews, and my interview program was called Fast Forward, hence because of the piece of music. But it wasn't any different than what I'm doing here with Tell Me Your Story. It's just that
Yeah.
was the name of it. And I have found some incredible music over the years, especially in my early years, in terms of using the music bridges in popular songs.
Hmm.
Or if I was able to create the karaoke kind of thing with where I push the vocals in the background by going out of phase with one channel and mixing down mono.
Hmm.
And that process in and of itself was so much fun. We had a reel to reel at the station back in Phoenix that was in a rack, but the rack was on wheels. So it wasn't a real big thing. And it was on a pivot. You could pivot it at, vertical, horizontal, or anywhere in between, right?
Hmm.
Well, you couldn't really sit at it. So you had to kneel. So we used to jokingly say that I'm doing some production here. I'm kneeling at the audio gods or before the audio gods and using the splicing block and the China
Hmm.
marker and the splicing tape and so forth. And I would never throw away the bits that I cut out until when I was done, because sometimes, and this happened to me, I'd have to splice them back in
Hmm.
because I didn't cut it quite right. But I got it back together perfectly, and then I spliced it again and on and on and on. And you know what? Those days, believe it or not, I really do miss.
It did have a certain amount of care that you had to look at it. And you couldn't manipulate things so quickly. And so you had to be very diligent about what your artistic choices were going to be. Absolutely. When you're splicing a tape, sometimes you've basically trashed that performance if you can't get it back together again.
Yeah.
You have to completely re-record it. Yeah.
Do you
I
ever
remember.
splice cassette tape?
It's been so many years
But
since I've
yeah.
had to try to do that. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course the winding of carts. We had a machine that we borrowed from our engineer back then, and that was fun for me. That process. I set it up and had the big pancake over on one side, and then you put the spool it through and everything. I just and I took the advice of the people in the vocational school I went to. What was it called? It was called Arizona Tech.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they told us was when you go to work for a radio station, you need to learn everything you can about every department before you decide to specialize.
Mhm.
And I did my best to do that. And it's been such a blast. I even worked for the local number one news talk station in Phoenix, KTAR, back in the 80s. And I was doing the overnight shift, producing the Phoenix, the affiliation for the Larry King Show.
Oh, wow.
And I often
Yeah.
tell people, I says, hey, I went to the Larry King School of Broadcasting. I didn't know he had a school. Well, he didn't really, but he taught me in interviewing. He would always tell people, because he used to take phone calls,
Hmm.
I don't prepare. I want to be as fresh as the callers because they don't know who this person is necessarily. This was before Google. And so that's the tack that I have taken in my career to this day. But now I label it that the universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride. You
Yeah.
kind of feel that way when you're producing, that the universe is guiding you. You're under you're under a spell.
What I think in a lot of ways, especially when I'm in an interview, it's very easy to go back to stories that you've told a few times over. You know how they work, you know the rhythm of them.
Hmm.
It's much harder to stay in that moment with that person and hear that question and really try to sink in on what they're asking and why they're asking it. So the universe is there through the improvisation that is surrounding the preparation that you've done beforehand. Like with most interviews, if you come into an interview and you've never listened to that person interview another person before. It could be good, it could be bad, you never know. But I think if you go in with a little bit of preparation, then the improvisation can then take over and you can be fully committed to that moment.
Yeah. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
disagree with you. And that's not to say that I haven't prepared a little in some instances.
Yeah.
I interviewed Howard Bloom just recently on his latest work. Fascinating individual.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time back at the religious station, and it was just a transmitter site, and we had just redesigned it. And I get this phone call saying, "Oh, hey, I'm so and so, and I'm here to do an interview with Richard Dugan." I said, "Oh, okay." Rather than saying, "Well, I don't really have you on my schedule, let's reschedule it," I said, "Hold on." I put him on hold, got everything set up. I didn't have any materials. Got him back on the phone, got him set up. And I said, "Okay, I just need to ask you a couple quick questions. Number one, give me your first and last name so I have this written down. Number two, I need the title of your book." All right. And back then there were no websites.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay, so all right, here we go." And I started the tape recording, and we did 2 hours. Two
Wow.
hours.
Yeah.
And there's never one question that I would start with if I don't have any information. It's like the questions that come into my mind are the questions I'm going to ask. I've even had a question come into my mind. I don't know about you when you've been doing stuff. No, that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. Go away. And it won't go away. So I then told the guest, I said, "I'm sorry, I have to stop my questioning here and ask you this question because it's nagging at me. The universe is nagging at me to ask this question." So I asked the question, and off we go into another direction that was perfectly appropriate for the conversation.
Do
And
you seek out a lot of other information, like and what I mean by that is like something that's sort of weird. I will occasionally be like, I'll see something and it's something I know nothing about. And for example, there was a guy who was doing a quilting class,
Mhm.
and I don't know anything about quilting. But he looked like he was a really creative guy. The way that he dressed, the way that he presented himself, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I signed up for it, not knowing a thing about quilting. I
Mhm.
walked into this class with all of these ladies who were kind of in their late 40s, early 50s, 60s, who were master quilters.
Yeah.
And then I come walking in and I look very, very odd in amongst this group of people. But honestly, what I wanted to know was everyone has that creative essence, that need to make something. How is yours fed through those filters of fabric and quilting?
Yeah.
And the guys, let's see, what was his name was Cafe Facet, I believe his name was Cafe Facet,
Oh,
and
that's
he was a
great.
really amazing quilter, and he had done all of these amazing fabrics and putting them together in different ways. And I sought that out just because I wanted that one bit of creativity of how I could pull that into my universe. And maybe that question that you're talking about, that one that won't leave you alone until you ask it,
Uh-huh.
I think that's that same sort of impulse. It's like, where is that small thing that's not part of my stock and trade that I can take in and incorporate into what I do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful, I'm not going to say line, but there's a wonderful element that is written into James Redfield's book, Celestine Prophecy.
Mhm.
And he talks about how we as individuals, we each have messages for one another,
Mhm.
and that we need to be connecting with one another in community and what have you, and share those messages and allow the others to share their messages with us. So, and then I add to that then helps us to fit new puzzle pieces into our picture that we're trying to create of what we perceive as the grand scheme of things, and have an understanding of our existence and our role in this life and so on and so forth, our life's purpose. And I use the analogy of Star Trek and that we cannot share those messages if we put up our shields. It
Hmm.
won't work. All right. You can weaponize, all right, you can fire your weapons, okay, but that's not what we want to do. That's not building community. So I view, for example, you, Colby Elliott. You are ostensibly you are a Christmas present I get to open and I get to learn about your world. And what I love that I've learned about your world is that your world and mine are very similar. The initial experiences, individual experiences are different,
Hmm.
but the places that we have, the things that we've experienced internally are so similar, and I love that. I just kindred spirits of sorts, and the passion that we both have is just really cool. That's one of the reasons why I can hardly wait to move and put my studio together in a way that is efficient, but it's comfortable and all of those things that and it works really well and sounds good and so forth. And I can start getting busy in our new home, and I'm just really looking forward to that. That's going to be exciting. So I thank you
Absolutely.
for allowing me to unwrap you,
Yes.
metaphorically speaking.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's been a lot of fun.
You're listening to Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan with Colby Elliott, and Colby, I want to thank you for being a part of the work that we're doing here, even through the process of sharing your joy, your happiness. You're changing the world, and I thank you for being a part of that. I also want to ask you three final questions. I ask all of my guests, but I really appreciate you giving us so much time here on the program.
Sure.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and streaming live at richarddugan.com. Oh, don't forget about Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. And we hope that you'll also check out our podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and we're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. We hope that you will subscribe and click notification. We hope that you'll also go to Amazon and pick up a copy of my book, Choices: 5 Steps for Life. It is available in hardcover and Kindle and paperback. And we hope that you will leave us a tip at PayPal. That's our tip jar, PayPal. And if you go to richarddugan.com, there's a link to Amazon for the book and a link to PayPal for the tip. And we thank you, thank you, thank you for those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. Please take some time to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. With all of that being said, we go to our final three questions for our very special guest. The first of those questions is, who is Colby Elliott?
Hmm. Colby Elliott is a questing soul that will move over the earth for a certain amount of time before rejoining everything else. And while I'm there, I want to move within those currents and I want to create wonder and joy. So I would say that's who I am as a force moving forward, trying to create those elements.
What gets you up in the morning?
The chance to experience something interesting and meaningful. And that can be a conversation with a friend. It can be a sight within the world. It can be an idea within a book. But that thing that to feel the fire of that thing that's going to spark my imagination and
Mm.
seek it out.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, I think my best day was probably the day that I married my wife.
Mm.
And that was almost 30 years ago. On September 30th was our 30th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And we,
Congratulations.
thank you. We've been together for 32 years. But I would say that our wedding day was, although it was a blur, probably the best day. Um, she's been my partner, my travel companion. Um, when things are going well, she's the first person I want to go tell about it. And yeah, so I would say when we started our formal journey, although I could say when we met, but I would say probably when we formalized it.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Colby, thank you again for joining us here on the program, and we look forward to having you back again and finding out more about some of the things that you have written about. And we'll set something up as we go through the latter part of 25 into 26, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks so much for having me and just continue the journey. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you. And I thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.